Hey folks, welcome to Deep Dive Dispatch, the podcast where we don't just scratch the surface. We dig deep into the political landscapes that shape our world today. I'm excited to introduce your guides on this journey through history and headlines, John Matthews and his insightful co-host, Sarah Collins. Together, they'll peel back the layers of complex political issues, offering a slightly conservative viewpoint while staying rooted in facts and historical context. So, buckle up for a thought-provoking ride as we dive into the stories behind the stories. This is Deep Dive Dispatch. Let's get started.
Hey, you. Ever feel like you're trying to figure out crime trends, in the U.S. and like you're just wading through this thick fog? You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Well, we've got a whole bunch of sources here, a bunch of articles and research, and even a Department of Justice report.
Oh, wow.
That suggests it's even more complicated than we think.
A real mixed bag of information.
So we've got articles from the Washington Examiner, some insights from the Pew Research Center, some stuff from the Marshall Project.
Interesting.
And even this, pretty in-depth report from the Department of Justice's Office of the Inspector General.
Okay.
Plus, to make things even more interesting, we've got some data on public perception from Gallup, just to add, another layer to this whole thing.
And the central question, I think, that we're going to be grappling with today is why the FBI's latest crime report, which shows this, pretty significant decrease in violent crime, feels so out of sync with what we're seeing and hearing, out in the real world.
Yeah, it's like the headlines are all like, crime is down, murder's down 13%, violent crime overall is down almost 6% for 2023.
Yeah.
But, something just feels off.
Right. And that's where this Washington Examiner article comes in.
Okay.
It really kind of throws a wrench in that whole, crime is down narrative by pointing out some really major flaws in the way that the FBI is collecting and reporting this data.
Interesting.
The article really focuses in on this, transition to a new reporting system. It's called NIBRS.
Okay, NIBRS.
It stands for the National Incident-Based Reporting System.
That's a mouthful.
It is.
But it's supposed to be more detailed, more comprehensive than the old system, right?
Right. The idea was to move beyond just counting crimes and to actually try to understand the circumstances surrounding those crimes. So getting more details about victims, offenders, locations, all the ingredients for a more nuanced picture of crime.
Yeah, that sounds good in theory, but it seems like maybe the execution hasn't been so smooth.
Yeah, messy, I think, is the word that the article uses.
Yeah, maybe messy.
And they point out that in 2021, when the FBI kind of mandated the use of this new NIBRS system, a lot of police departments, especially in big cities, were just not equipped to handle it.
Really?
I mean, think about it. Major cities like, Chicago, Los Angeles, New York City.
Huge.
They deal with massive amounts of crime data. Switching to a whole new reporting system overnight is a huge logistical nightmare.
So you're saying these major cities, the ones that often drive national crime statistics, just didn't even submit data to the FBI?
That's exactly what happened. And that's a huge problem if you're trying to get an accurate national picture of crime trends. It's like trying to measure the average temperature of a country.
Yeah.
But you just leave out all the data from the hottest regions.
Right. So then how is the FBI reporting this decrease in crime?
Well, they're using these estimations to try and fill in the gaps. But as the article points out, that's just not reliable at all. You can't just plug in hypothetical numbers and expect to capture the complexity of what's happening in these cities.
It's like trying to, paint a portrait of somebody.
Right. Yeah.
But you're only using, their childhood photo as a reference.
Yeah, you might get some of the basic features right.
Yeah.
But you're going to miss a lot of the detail.
And the nuance, So this data is misleading because it's making it seem like crime is down everywhere.
Right.
When in reality, we're missing huge chunks of information from some of the areas that are most affected by crime.
Exactly. And the article points out that this isn't even just a 2021 problem.
Oh, no.
Even the data that the FBI did receive in 2023 still doesn't match up with what a lot of these police departments are reporting publicly.
They're saying one thing to the FBI and a different thing to the public.
Exactly. The article specifically mentions Baltimore, Milwaukee, and Nashville. As having these discrepancies.
So that raises some serious concerns about how reliable this data is overall.
Absolutely. If we can't even trust that the numbers are accurate,
Yeah.
any conclusions we draw from them are, shaky at best.
It's like building a house on a foundation of sand.
Right.
The whole thing's just going to collapse. So how do we even have an informed conversation about crime when we're working with, like, incomplete and potentially inaccurate data?
It's a recipe for making bad decisions.
Yeah.
And wasting resources. Speaking of unreliable data,
Oh, yeah.
let's look at this analysis from the Marshall Project.
Okay.
They did this really interesting deep dive into which police agencies actually reported data to the FBI in 2022.
Oh, wow.
And the results are pretty alarming.
What did they find?
They found that 31%, a full third of police agencies across the country,
Wow.
did not report crime data to the FBI that year.
So not only are we missing data from these major cities
Right.
that couldn't keep up with the new system,
Yeah.
we're also missing data from a huge number of police agencies
Across the country, yeah.
all over the place.
Yeah.
It's like trying to navigate a maze in the dark
Right.
with a flashlight that keeps, like, flickering on and off.
Exactly. And without a complete and consistent data set, it makes it so difficult to do any meaningful analysis of crime trends.
Right, because you're getting, like, you might see some interesting things.
Yeah.
But you don't have the full picture. And speaking of missing pieces.
Oh, yeah?
Let's talk about this Department of Justice report
Okay.
on the FBI's handling of child sex abuse cases.
Right.
This one's especially concerning
Yeah, really troubling.
because it just highlights how high the stakes are when it comes to having accurate data collection and reporting.
This report was done by the Office of the Inspector General.
Okay.
And they conducted a thorough audit and found some really, really serious issues with how the FBI is handling these cases.
Like what kind of issues?
We're talking about problems with mandatory reporting,
Yeah.
issues with victim services, even cases not being investigated in a timely manner.
Oh, well.
The report found a shocking backlog of cases
Really?
and a real lack of proper documentation.
That's heartbreaking to think that cases involving these incredibly vulnerable victims
Right.
are just falling through the cracks because of, bureaucratic inefficiency.
Right.
Or data management issues. That's just unacceptable.
It underscores the fact that these data issues aren't just about numbers on a spreadsheet.
Right.
They have real-world consequences that impact people's lives in profound ways.
So to recap,
Yeah.
we've got missing data from major cities, underreporting from police agencies across the country,
Right.
and serious flaws in the way the FBI is handling, like incredibly sensitive cases.
Yeah.
It's starting to feel like the whole system is just like built on this like very shaky ground.
And that's why it's so important to be critical consumers of information. Don't just accept the headlines you read.
Yeah.
Dig a little deeper, look at multiple sources, think about the potential biases and limitations of the data.
Yeah.
Because, as we've seen, the numbers can be manipulated.
Oh, for sure.
They can be misinterpreted, and sometimes they're just plain missing.
And that brings us to this really interesting twist in this whole data dilemma.
Yeah.
The disconnect between what the statistics are telling us and how people actually feel about crime.
Right. Yeah.
We've got this Gallup research that reveals something kind of surprising.
Interesting.
It seems like a lot of people are feeling a lot more anxious about crime than the official numbers might suggest. But before we get into that, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back to unpack this whole fascinating world of public perception.
Hey everyone, just taking a moment to send a huge shout out to all of you tuning in to Deep Dive Dispatch. Your support really keeps us going. And if you're enjoying the deep dives and want to help us continue bringing you these thought-provoking discussions, head over to deepdivedispatch.com. It's an awesome way to support the show and keep the conversation alive. Big thanks for being part of our community. Now, let's jump back into the next part of our episode and keep unraveling these intriguing topics. Enjoy.
Right.
And how it often clashes with, statistical realities.
It's funny, right? Even with, all these data gaps and potential inaccuracies we've been talking about,
Yeah.
the public's perception of crime just seems to be going in a whole other direction.
Totally. It's like we're living in two different worlds. On one hand, you've got these headlines saying crime's down.
Right.
But then you've got this feeling, like this real sense of unease that things just aren't as safe as they used to be.
And you can really see that feeling reflected in the Gallup research.
Yeah. What do they say?
Their latest poll shows that 63%, a full 63% of Americans think that the U.S. crime problem is extremely or very serious.
Right.
That's the highest it's ever been in their polling history.
63%, that's a huge number.
And it's not even just a vague sense of unease,
Right.
The poll also found that 77% of Americans believe that crime is up from a year ago.
So people are really feeling this.
Yeah.
But why is there such a disconnect?
Right.
Is it just media sensationalism? Are news outlets just blowing things out of proportion to get more clicks and views?
I mean, the media definitely plays a role. Crime stories, especially the violent ones, they tend to really grab our attention. They tap into those primal fears.
Right. Makes you feel vulnerable.
Exactly. And when those stories get, repeated and amplified over and over again, it creates this impression that crime is way more prevalent than it actually is.
It's like a snowball effect.
Yeah.
A few incidents turn into this massive wave of fear.
Exactly. But it's not just the media, right?
What else?
I mean, our personal experiences, the stories we hear from our friends and family, those also shape how we see crime. If you or someone has been a victim of a crime, it just naturally makes you feel more vulnerable, even if the crime rate's actually low in your area.
Right, like your personal experience trumps the data in a way.
It does, and we also have to consider the political climate, too.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole other thing.
When politicians use crime as this, wedge issue, stoking those fears and promising to crack down on lawlessness, it can really amp up public anxiety, even if their claims aren't really backed up by evidence.
They're kind of preying on people's fears to push their own agendas.
And that's why it's so crucial to be really discerning about the information we consume.
Right.
Question those narratives, look beyond the headlines.
Yeah.
Think about the motivations of the people shaping the conversation.
It's not just about understanding the data.
Right.
It's about understanding who's presenting the data and why. It's like looking at a painting and realizing that the lighting in the room is off.
Oh, that's a good analogy. Yeah.
It's changing how we see the colors.
Exactly. And, speaking of distorted perceptions, we should probably circle back to this whole issue of underreporting that we were talking about earlier.
Right, the hidden iceberg of crime.
Exactly. Both the Washington Examiner and Pew Research really highlight this as a major reason why crime data can be so inaccurate.
It's like all these crimes are happening, but they never make it into the official statistics.
Right, because they're not being reported for whatever reason. They just become invisible.
The article actually mentions the federal government's victim survey.
Oh, right.
Which tries to capture this dark figure of crime. The stuff that doesn't get reported to the police.
It's like they're trying to shine a light on that hidden iceberg.
Yeah.
By going directly to people and asking about their experiences.
Have you been a victim of crime? Whether you reported it or not.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is that survey consistently shows way higher crime rates than the FBI's data.
Which makes sense. I mean, there are all sorts of reasons why someone might not report a crime. Maybe they don't trust the police.
Yeah.
Maybe they're afraid of retaliation. Maybe they think it's pointless. Or maybe it's something really sensitive and they just don't want to involve law enforcement.
All valid reasons. And at the end of the day, the FBI data is only as good as what's reported to them.
Right. If a huge chunk of crime's going unreported, then the picture is incomplete from the very beginning.
It's like solving a puzzle when half the pieces are missing.
Right. You can see some of it.
Yeah.
But you never get the full picture. And to make matters even more complicated, there's also this whole issue of underreporting by the police themselves.
Right.
This is a bit more controversial, but the Washington Examiner brings up a really interesting point.
Okay.
They say that police departments, especially ones that are facing political pressure to show that crime is down, might be tempted to, kind of fudge the numbers a little bit.
Juke the stats, as they say.
Like downplaying offenses or even erasing them altogether, just to make their city stats look better.
Exactly. And while it's tough to get really solid evidence of this, there have been some pretty high-profile cases that suggest it does happen.
The article mentions an investigation into the LAPD, the Los Angeles Police Department.
Right.
They found thousands of crimes that were either erased or downgraded.
Wow.
Between 2005 and 2012.
That's a lot.
They basically artificially reduced the city's crime rate by 7%.
That's a huge amount of data just disappearing.
Poof. Gone. So it's a good reminder that we can't just blindly trust these statistics.
Right.
We have to think about the agendas,
Yeah.
the pressures, the potential inefficiencies that are shaping how that data is collected and presented.
Absolutely. So if we can't totally trust the FBI data and we can't always count on what individual police departments are reporting, what can we rely on? What do we do?
It does feel like we're just lost at sea here.
It is a challenge. There's no doubt about that. But I don't think the answer is just throwing out all crime data entirely.
Okay.
I think it's about being more critical, more discerning in how we approach it. We need to cross-reference, look at trends over longer periods, consider the context of specific events, be aware of the potential biases at play.
So we have to be like detectives.
Exactly.
Gather all the evidence, examine it carefully,
right,
and then try to piece together the most likely scenario.
Even if some of the pieces are missing.
Right.
Or don't quite fit.
Yeah.
One way to start piecing things together, is to compare the FBI's data with info from other sources, like, for example, the Major Cities Chiefs Association, the MCCA.
What?
The Washington Examiner article actually does this.
Okay.
And they find some interesting differences.
Like what?
Well, for one, the MCCA data, which looks specifically at larger police departments, shows a smaller decline in homicides and violent crime than what the FBI reported.
Interesting. So we're seeing these different trends depending on which source we're looking at.
Right, and that tells us something really important.
What's that?
The situation's a lot more nuanced than just this simple crime is up, crime is down story.
Yeah.
We're dealing with a complex set of factors, and the data, even with all its flaws, can still help us to kind of unravel some of those threads.
It's like one of those optical illusions where the image looks completely different depending on how you look at it.
I like that.
So we can just shift our perspective, look at things from different angles,
right,
really challenge our assumptions to get a clearer picture.
Exactly. And ultimately, I think that's what this deep dive is all about.
Yeah.
It's not about giving you all the answers. It's about encouraging you to think critically, ask questions, engage with the data in a more informed, more nuanced way.
Because as we've seen, the world of crime statistics is not black and white.
Definitely not.
It's filled with shades of gray. And it's up to us to kind of navigate those complexities.
Yeah.
And make sense of all this information.
So the question is, what does this all mean for you?
Right.
The listener. How can you use this knowledge to make more informed decisions?
Yeah.
Have more meaningful conversations about crime.
Right.
And advocate for solutions that actually address the root causes of this very complex issue.
Okay, so we've been talking about all this crime data,
Yeah.
all the gaps, the inconsistencies, the potential for, things to be manipulated.
Right.
And how all of that gets kind of filtered through our own perceptions of crime and safety.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, it's kind of overwhelming, right? How do we even begin to address crime when our whole understanding of it feels so shaky?
I think the first step is just admitting that the data is not perfect.
Yeah.
We have to accept that crime data is almost always incomplete.
Yeah.
It's subject to different interpretations.
Right. And it's influenced by all sorts of things we might not even be aware of.
Exactly. So it's not about just throwing out all the data, but being a little bit skeptical.
Having a critical eye.
Yeah, asking questions, Who collected this? How did they collect it? Could there be any biases? What's missing from this picture?
And also, being aware of our own perceptions and how they might be shaping our understanding.
Totally. We all come to this with our own preconceived ideas and biases.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's really important to try to recognize those and be open to challenging them.
So being humble, being curious, and being willing to admit we don't know everything.
Exactly. And I think that humility has to carry over to the way we think about solutions, too.
What do you mean?
Well, there's no one-size-fits-all answer to the problem of crime.
Right. Every community is different.
And works in one place might not work somewhere else.
Yeah.
And sometimes what sounds like common sense could actually backfire if it's not based on, real evidence and an understanding of the local situation.
So we have to be careful about those knee-jerk reactions.
Right, the tough on crime, more police kind of responses.
Yeah.
We have to really dig into the root causes of crime, the underlying issues.
Okay, so what are those?
We're talking about the social and economic factors.
Yeah.
The environmental factors, too.
Right.
We have to look at how we're supporting families and communities, how we're creating opportunities for people, and how we're addressing these systemic inequalities that often push people towards crime.
So crime isn't just a personal failing.
Right.
It's a symptom of bigger problems.
It is. And that's where things start to get really interesting, I think.
How so?
Well, it forces us to think more broadly about solutions. We have to look beyond just traditional law enforcement.
Right. Like what else is there?
Maybe the answer's not more cops on the street, but more mental health resources, job training programs, more affordable housing.
It's about investing in prevention.
Exactly. Creating communities where people feel supported, where they have opportunities to thrive.
Right, so they don't feel like crime's their only option.
Exactly. And that takes a real shift in how we think about crime and how we use our resources.
It's about recognizing that the criminal justice system is just one piece of the puzzle.
It is. We need to bring everyone to the table.
Who do you mean?
Community leaders, educators, social workers, healthcare providers.
Oh, wow. A lot of people.
Yeah. And law enforcement, too.
Okay.
Working together to come up with solutions that address those underlying issues.
So it's about collaboration, communication, breaking down those silos.
Absolutely.
And working towards a common goal.
And that's where you come in, the listener, you're a part of this too, Stay informed. Ask those critical questions.
Right.
Challenge your own assumptions and engage in these conversations about crime in your community.
Yeah.
You can support policies that address the root causes, advocate for organizations working on prevention, hold your elected officials accountable for creating a safer society.
It's about taking action.
It is, because this isn't just about numbers on a page.
Right.
It's about people's lives.
It's about making the world a better place, a safer place for everyone.
Exactly.
And that's something worth working towards.
That's the goal.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Hey folks, thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive Dispatch. We hope you found today's episode enlightening and packed full of insight. Remember, your support keeps us diving deep into the stories that matter. So if you enjoyed the show, make sure to download and share it with others who crave a deeper understanding of politics and history. And don't forget, we want to hear from you. If there's a topic out there that you think deserves a deep dive, reach out and let us know. Your input helps us bring you the most compelling content week after week. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll catch you next time on Deep Dive Dispatch. Keep exploring, folks.